Welcome to the Confidence Through Health podcast. My name is Jerry Snyder. As a health, wellness, and sports performance coach, my goal each week is to bring you experts to help you take control of your health and build your self-confidence. Thanks for including me today on your journey to better health. As an elite level runner and coach, I'm excited to introduce you to the All In Running Club. The All In Running Club exists to help you become a better runner. Whether you're a beginner, an elite runner, or anywhere in between, the mission of the All In Running Club is to give you the tools you need to find your success in running. Join today to take advantage of the 75% off yearly membership rate offer. Click the link below in the show notes to learn more. So on episode 193 of the Confidence Through Health podcast, I am delighted to bring Amy Fox on. She is a certified nutritionist, certified functional food professional, she has a master's of science in food nutrition services, and she's the founder of the Food and Mood Lab. And thank you, Amy, for being a guest.
Thank you so much for having me. I think as we were just talking about, anytime we can chat about things we love and all things food and nutrition, wellness, it makes for a great day. So I'm looking forward to the conversation and look forward to having this conversation.
So one of the things I love to do is to ask people why they got into what they're doing, because I think that also brings some insight into what's driving your passion, right? And I know that some of that came from watching your mom in her struggles with type 1 diabetes and navigating food and things with that, which of course I'm assuming back then to now, if somebody has type 1 diabetes, it's a little bit different and easier, but
right.
Tell us about how that all shaped your focus on food.
Yeah, it started when I was a teenager, actually. My mom, I didn't really get on this quest to pursue my passion around nutrition and related to my mom when I got a little older. But when I was younger, I like to tell the story that, when I was a teen in high school, it was like most teenage girls, just trying to figure myself out. And right. I almost got kicked out of high school because I refused to go to gym class. I had never in my life even owned a pair of running shoes. Right. And I went to a pretty strict school. You couldn't skip classes. And I just kept blowing off that running class. Right. And so I got a notice that if I didn't go to the next one, that I was going to get a detention. I didn't go to the next one. And so things got pretty serious. So I started running. Yeah. And I actually fell in love with it. I loved how I started to feel. And, when you're 14 years old, 15, 16, that age range, you're just trying to just figure out what yourself again and get to know who you are. And so along with enjoying running, I started to think about what else would make me feel good. And so I got curious about the kinds of foods I was eating, and that just carried on into college. I had the nickname Gump in college because I kept running. And, I started my sort of informal passion around food and nutrition. I just get on the bandwagon of any diet. And way back then it was, the old diets, trying to lose fat or this, that, or the other. But I just loved getting curious about it. And I definitely, the connection about movement and what choices I made around food, I just started to notice. I either felt really good or not so good, or just loved the way clothes fit or not. And so I think that curiosity just kind of kept me down that path throughout life. And it started to become more meaningful when I saw my mom. I saw her struggling with diabetes, but and over time, as the treatment of the disease modernized, she continued to just struggle with understanding. They send her to a nutritionist or a dietitian all the time. She's like, I don't really understand what foods. And she just always struggled with making sense of what choices should I make so that I can get better control over my disease. And so I often wonder if she had figured that out, if she just would have had a longer life, or maybe may not have declined as quickly. So Yeah, that's really kind of what led me on the path. And I decided to formalize it a few years ago and get my degree and then launch this passion project around food and mood.
Well, and as an endurance athlete myself and a runner myself, like I resonate with that. Like, okay, if I eat this and I go on a run, like it either felt really good or felt really bad. Like,
Yes.
or maybe after the run, like if I ate something like, oh, I didn't recover as well. Like maybe the food had something to do with it, and over time you sort of fine tune that, especially after you leave the, invincibility part of your teens and 20s, and then you start going like, oh, wow, that really affected me.
Yeah.
And I think as a runner or an endurance athlete, you see that stuff, but for the average person that's not doing those things, like the food still affects them that way, but they just may not see that, right?
Yes, right. And it feels like it's more out of like necessity rather, than something, a choice about how I want to show up in that day.
Right.
Just more like what's nearby, like a second, not even really a second thought to just what people are grabbing. And that these are decisions you're making about how you will show up in the coming hours, and even broader, how you might, start feeling months, years, what that longevity picture looks like.
Because it is sort of it's a compounding thing, right? Like the more, because what we're talking about is like those ultra processed foods that are bad for you, that not just because they're processed in a certain way, but because of what they're adding into it, the chemicals and toxins that your body can't, doesn't know what to do with.
Right.
So that stuff builds up and it starts messing with, your neurotransmitters and your ability to, so brain fog's a real thing that's food related, right?
Yes. It's usually the place I start with most of my clients. And people say, if I want to start feeling better, where do I start? We start with boxes and bagged foods.
Right.
Let's take a look there. It's amazing how simple, but yet how hard it seems to some about some of these choices.
Yeah. Well, and part of that's the addictive piece of it, right? Like, I mean, because that's a reality that they're the food companies that are processing this stuff, they're doing it in a way that's creating an addiction for us. And so breaking that is a big piece of that first step.
I agree. Yeah, for sure. We're on the same page there.
Yeah. And that first step can take, for some people, it can be a day or a week. For others, it could be months to break that.
Yeah, it can be. And I mean, I feel like I'm always trying to come up with really practical ways to do that as well, because that, it is, it's similar to any other addiction that we can think of, whether that be cigarettes, social media, your wine, however that might, whatever it might be, food, like we're talking about. But, that to me is oftentimes where the big struggle is how to, it's how to make that switch. And also, I think to help people understand that it's absolutely normal to enjoy food sometimes, like, and have that balance and understand that, this isn't, we're not on this, the goal isn't to be perfect. And it's to have control and make choices that, that are informed, in my opinion. Right.
And that you understand what's going to happen afterwards, right? That's what I always try and tell people is like, I as somebody who helps people with their meal plans and stuff, like if you go off the plan, I tell people, I really don't care. Like as long as you're choosing to do that. And it's not just the subconscious, I sat down on the sofa and wow, there's 2 bags of chips that disappeared. What happened? Yeah. Like if you sit down on the sofa and say, you know what, I really want a bag of chips, and you have a serving, it's processed. It's probably not the best snack for you. But if you're making the choice, like you said, then that's better overall than that unconscious just devouring food that just, you have no idea where it's coming from.
Yeah, it's the binging. And I think the other thing that I just experienced myself, I did an endurance event. I completed it a couple weeks ago, and it was hard. They're all hard, but this one, I dealt with some really bad weather. I did an endurance event called 29029 Everesting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so I've done 3, and this one was at Stratton Mountain, and it rained and poured the entire time.
Oh
So,
gosh.
in addition to it being a really tough mountain, in fact, if it were a sunny day, I would have said, "Ooh, Stratton was the toughest of the 3." And then you
Right.
add in the downpour and just unrelenting rain and mud,
Yeah.
made it really difficult. And so I know now it's a pattern when I do some of these, and it's really not just the event, it's the lead up of 20 plus weeks of
Mhm.
training and wear and tear. And so I come home and, I need to just not be on any sort of regimen. I mean,
Yeah.
the thought of having a goal, I need like a couple weeks of just not, thinking about what I eat and just eating for what I want. And,
Right.
and just when I feel good, I exercise.
Yeah.
So what happens is, and this is what I completely identify with most people, is that, after 2 weeks, you kind of get off the rails,
Yeah.
and it becomes harder and harder to get back on.
Yeah.
So I just had to give myself a good reset. And
Right.
so I keep experimenting with what's the easiest way to get back on, and like in a way that like gets me like in a sustainable way where I'm like just back fully on the healthy pattern. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm back. I mean, I feel like I've recovered
Right.
and I'm back to my healthy habits.
Well, and I'm glad you say that, because I try to do the same thing as far as like, if I hear something that's like, oh, here's the latest research says we should try this or that, or like, I always try and do it on myself first before I recommend anybody else, because it's like, I want to see how it feels. I want to know like what changes is it going to make me go through, not just physically, but like mood wise. Right. And so,
Right.
and so that begs the question of like, if somebody's deciding to make those choices, like, okay, I need to change, I've got to start eating healthier. Is it common to have like big mood fluctuations around that time?
So I think for the most part, I mean, I think it depends on the person and how poor their diet has been.
Right.
And oftentimes too, how honest they're being.
Oh
Just
yeah.
because sometimes I'll provide some structure to like some changes in eating. And I'm of the mindset we don't go overall overarching big sweeping changes. We start small, but when someone's really excited to make the change, they'll like say they're eating everything, but then they'll cut out all carbs that I've included because they're afraid that eating everything will do something. So, so it does depend on the person and the situation, but I think so. I think there can be a detoxing, like just if you're going to eat whole foods and you playing with a lot of real whole foods and you haven't been eating that, you might get some headaches for the first few days. You might have some mood fluctuation. So it depends, but more often, the average person who probably hasn't been eating as good as they should and might be eating a little bit, or some foods that are ultra processed, they usually feel good after 2 or 3 days. They're like, oh my gosh. And I have this blog where I talk about like the first, like it's a strategy to make your diet stick. And it's really a Jedi mind trick.
Yeah.
Before you start the plan, do these things. And it's really the healthy pattern. Like remove at least one boxed item, like do a few things, and then they start feeling better. I'm like, you really don't need to be on the diet. Right. You just need to find a way to stay consistent with some basic healthy habits. But I love how it doesn't take long. It doesn't take long, just a couple of days, and you can start feeling the effects of healthy eating.
Right. Yeah, and I agree. You just got to push through that initial change, because anything you do that's going to initial change, just like any other part of your life, you're disrupting. You're disrupting a habit, you're disrupting a pattern, and so like you've got to get over that initial hump. It's not going to last forever. And so because I know people that have like made that change and they've had headaches, and I'm like, and they want to come back and say, see, I can't eat healthy because it makes me feel bad. I'm like, no, your body's getting rid of the stuff that's bad. And it just has to filter through your system. And sometimes that takes a couple of days.
Yeah. And you mentioned something about like trying either the food or a plan on yourself first. And I do the same thing. And I tried a food last week and I was just like, you keep thinking. I ran into the grocery store and I was getting something in the middle aisles. And I'm like, I mean, there's so many new products that are pseudo healthy. And I'm like, okay, so there's this, I mean, what person doesn't want the crunchy, sweet, maybe the hint of salt in it for it to be 100% healthy, right?
Right.
I mean, it's just like the dream. and so like $10 later, when I got this bag of it was like cinnamon toast crumbles. And I'm like, it's keto, blah, 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 all the things.
Right.
And I'm like, well, this is the thing I'm going to put in my healthy Greek yogurt that's healthy. Yeah. And so I tried a few bites of it. The aftertaste was horrible. And I was like, didn't even take much. And I didn't feel great. I did not feel good. I'm sure it was from some of maybe the fake sugars or just some of the other additives. Right. Yeah. So occasionally I'll dip into the aisle and wonder, have we really gotten there yet? And so I'm at a place now. I have invested a lot of time in my kitchen. I have a few baked, just pancakes and things that are on my blog. But sometimes I'll just get swooped up in what I'm seeing on social media. I'm like, let me try new, like the new cookie, the new brownie that has all these things in it. Yeah. And after so many failed attempts, I'm just have the sweet, just have it.
Right.
Just have the cookie, enjoy it. It's really not worth it. You either are going to replace it with natural sugars and you still are eating sugar.
Right.
It's natural sugar, better, but you're still eating a food and like maybe a cookie this big.
Right.
So you're either going to substitute it with a lot of things that are still the better, but sugar, or you're going to use all the fake stuff and you might have some bloating and cramping. So after a lot of failed attempts and a lot of money, we just have the sweet thing, enjoy it. Right. And then move on.
And that's where portion control really comes in.
Yeah.
Right. Because and I say the same thing. It's like, you don't have to be so uber, everything's absolutely healthy all the time. Like, go ahead and have your splurge, but it's portion control and it's not every day.
Right.
Right. It's like,
I agree. Yeah.
And I don't even like tying it to a special occasion. It's like, don't make it, because then you're trying to make it like, oh, well, this is a special occasion now. And then, okay, well, and that one's one too. And then you're trying to celebrate everything, where it's like, you know what, if it's just Tuesday night and nothing's going on and you want to run and go grab some ice cream, go grab a scoop of ice cream somewhere and be fine. Yeah.
And, to build on that, like I'm never going to miss an opportunity to connect with my kids ever. Right. Because, you could provide all the research in the world on food, but there's probably more research about feeling connected and connecting with people. Yeah. And so I just try to keep that in check with myself and with people that I work with. And my kids love ice cream. I don't love ice cream, but and they notice now. They're all teens and they notice when I eat or when I don't eat. And that matters to me, to set an example and set the right example. Like, let's open this pint of, I live in Cincinnati and Grater's ice cream is like the best. Yeah. And so that is a special occasion because I think it's like $15 a gallon. So
oh my gosh. Yeah.
It's worth it. The dark chocolate in there, man.
Yeah.
So when we get it, we'll have like a couple bites or a scoop. And I've lived enough life now when I put my eating plan or just what I'm in front of that, they're like, come on, mom. And I'm like, it's important to me to have those connect moments. I had the best conversations with my kids over ice cream. And I'm a mom of 3 boys. And I tell you what, they're tough to talk. They stop, they're not like girls. And when they're younger. And so that was always my strategy. If I really want to check in on them, let's get some ice cream. Yeah. And so it's not the same if you're not eating it with them.
Right. Well, and that's exactly one of the things that, the blue zones that Dan Buettner's talked about is, connection with community is a huge piece of that, more than it is really. They don't look at their food and have this ultra diet plan, menu plan
Yeah.
that they're following all the time, but it's that connection piece that they're
Right.
meeting and eating around food, and having relationships with people, and that does play a bigger part, which speaks to, again, like if you're at home alone and you had a stressful day, and you find yourself eating the chips and the ice cream, that's the red flag.
Right. I think we're dealing with something completely different. We're dealing with like emotional eating and binging that like requires just maybe a different approach. You know,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like but it's helpful to know that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a big believer that, and I'm sure you are too, because I know how, I know I get a feel for how talented you are in this space,
Oh,
but
yeah.
we're talking about making changes here. It's
Yeah.
always an inside job. It
Right.
is, we all will have an opportunity or a situation come up where we enjoy the bag of chips or we might indulge too much.
Mhm.
But it's really recognizing to, just get curious about those thoughts, behaviors, and if it becomes a pattern, because it's really not about the chips and the cookie or whatever
Right.
it might be. It's how you're coping in some way, or just
Right.
maybe some emotions that you need to deal with that food is never, or any other vice is ever going to handle. So I try to make that, I try to be tough with my clients, say, this is my requirement, that you're willing
Right.
to do inside work, because, I think that's really at the heart of it all.
Mhm. Well, and that's I mean, really, that's the connection of food and mood
Yes.
that you're driving towards. It's like, that's the connection, is that, like, because anybody can go out there and you can get lost and just eat whatever and just go from, the meal we're supposed to have in the morning, and then go to work and have a work lunch or something, and then, snack from the vending machine, come home,
Yeah.
eat something, and snack it as you're watching TV. And then at the end of the day, you have no idea what you ate because you didn't have a plan. You just went through the day and you were stressed about everything. And then you go to if you go to sleep, because a lot of times if you're not eating properly, you've got insomnia or sleep problems, and then you wake up the next morning and you don't want to go through any of that stuff because you're in a horrible mood.
Yeah, it's so true. I'm a big believer of that too. I talk about how I love how, like, I mean, it does start at sleep.
Mm.
Like, sleep is the foundation, but people are unaware of that connection between what you're eating and when you're eating, and how, like, just how pivotal it is to understand that so you can sleep better.
Yeah. And one of the things that I found, and I've talked to a couple of people, it may just be sort of unique to me, but one of the things is that, like, the cleaner that I eat, the less I dream, and like they're like short, quick dreams right before I wake up. Like, and if I eat a little off, have something especially if I have something that's processed, then, like, I have these huge, crazy, vibrant dreams that last like all night, or might wake me up at 2 or 3 in the morning. And I'm like, whoa, what is going on?
Yeah.
And so I feel that connection. Like, for me, it's like really vivid.
Oh, I haven't noticed that pattern. I mean, I'm a person, like, unfortunately, I think, like a lot of moms, like, sleep is just always something I have to figure out. I just think, I think it's moms and dads, but I think, like, we think a lot about what we need to be doing, or what else we need to be worrying about. What's the worst case scenario on this, that, or that? So when I sleep, and actually, of course, I've noticed when I'm eating and I clean and I'm limiting or not, I don't have any alcohol, I sleep awesome. I look much better. My chances of getting a solid 6 or 7 are, like, so much better when those things are in motion.
So how does, like, because I know a lot of people, and my wife and I used to do this as well. We were members of wine clubs and all of this before I really fine-tuned my nutrition and health. And so now I haven't had a drink in several years. She hasn't had a drink in a couple of years. but alcohol is thought of and sort of advertised to as the, like, have this and relax, have this and you'll feel better. Like, oh, it'll take you to this place, like how many commercials that you see alcohol advertised and they're on the beach or they're having fun,
Yeah.
like, the beach will make you feel good by itself. Right. Like, so I'm like, I get that they're trying to advertise and all that, but it's like, I think that connection that people are trying to make with alcohol fixing their mood is incorrect.
Yeah. I mean, you're really striking a nerve with me just because I couldn't agree more. I am a certified sober curious coach as well,
Cool.
alcohol-free coach. Yeah. And because I think we are in a culture where we are bombarded with imagery, social media, commercial, everything, where we and by the way, we're also in a society where it feels like sometimes you're going against the grain because you don't want to have a drink. Like you talked about that connection and feeling community with food. A lot of people think that they can't have fun or they won't connect with their spouse or their friends unless they have a glass of wine in their hand.
Right.
And I call alcohol or really wine like your best frenemy.
Yeah.
Really is like, it is alcohol is a master of deception. I mean, we all think that we are going to unwind or we're going to have that nightcap and that's going to be the thing that will allow us to relax. And it has the opposite effect. It really robs you of your happiness chemicals and so many more negative effects of alcohol, all for this 20-minute buzz. And because you do get about a 20-minute high, but I found that, and I talk about alcohol as it just needs to always be something that's small and irrelevant in my life. And as I continued to get older, it didn't take much to just rob me of sleep and of happiness. Like I was just someone who I started to notice that when I would have even one or two glasses, which I think is not a lot, but the World Health Organization now says that that's the max unless you want to put yourself at risk for a lot of diseases. Yeah. So it doesn't take much to put yourself in that category. But I would have this gray cloud over my head for days. And the best way I can describe it for me is like my light always felt dimmed about everything. Like I just enjoy energy, productivity. And so I think once I got enlightened, had a few bouts of moderation, which never works, unfortunately. Right. It's a lot of work for me, I should say. So I just think it's it's one of the best kept secrets out there. Yeah. It's just going alcohol free and just how awesome you feel. And so I'm a big believer in that type of lifestyle. Not to say that I won't ever have another glass of wine, but I really love this lifestyle. I feel like it's a pretty amazing way to connect and engage with people. Right.
Well, and it benefits you from what I've experienced now that it's been, I want to say, I think I'm going on 4 years since I've had anything to drink. And like I said, we were members of wine clubs where like we would go and bottles of wine and we'd go to parties and
I have a wine room in my house. I renovated a living room into a wine bar. So I get it. Like it's a big part of our lifestyle. Right.
No, I actually renovated a little section in ours that has the whole bar and everything. And now it's just like, oh, what do I do with that now? But the difference of and I think what a lot of people think they might lose is that fun piece of oh, I can go because that makes me relax and I can have more fun. Mm-hmm. But I've found that I have just as much fun, if not more fun, because I don't have that after effect when it's later that evening or the next morning.
100%. I mean, I used to be the person that always fell asleep. It didn't take much. I mean, I just get tired. And then I'm like, I wouldn't have the energy to watch a show with my kids or I would be the one that want to go home. Mm-hmm. So I don't get those tired effects, but I I've dabbled in this space for years, meaning like I do a sober October and then I'd be like waiting until the end when I was allowed
Right.
to have a drink. And I firmly believe that it is 100% about your mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go into it with this vibe, like, hey, I'm checking this out. No, I want to do this. Yeah. I'm enjoying, no, I'm choosing not to drink tonight because I'm just going to I want to spend time with you. I want to I want to like catch up. And so if you literally flip your mindset and your vibe is about just being curious about it rather than, the kind of being frustrated, like I've got X amount of days, or I'm white knuckling through it or gritting through whatever commitment I think I've made. I mean, that's a recipe for getting back on the moderation plan.
Right.
But I think it's all about your mindset. And because that's either going to be a really enjoyable experience and you're just going to say, hey, I'm going to see how I feel and I'm going to enjoy the conversation tonight. And there's nowadays, if you've walked down the aisle of any grocery store, grab a Corona and that's alcohol free. Or every brand seems to have a beer. They're still figuring out wine, but I still have found a few non-alcoholic wines. But I mean, I found out that as remember I talked about being curious about that is like a magic trick. Yeah. And I would find that when I would try to moderate, I would have a glass of wine. I'm like, okay, I just had a glass of wine on Friday, but I would it didn't even take more than a day. My mind would start to expect it the next day. Like, it's about that time, no matter what promises or rules I had. Yeah. And it got me to thinking, I'm like, why am I thinking about it like this? I mean, why am I thinking? So it got me really curious about how addictive it is. And so it took, just had to be intentional, but I just put anything in the glass and I found it passed. Like I was like, I don't need to have wine. I made myself a really pretty drink in my best wine glass. And I still had that dopamine rush because I was connecting with my husband. Right. And it wasn't about what was in the glass. It was about that 5 o'clock wind down time. And that really opened my mind. I was like, wait a minute. I just had an awesome conversation. I felt like we had a close moment and we just had a nice conversation and it didn't matter what was in the wine glass, but you kind of have to go through that and take note and just again, kind of be curious about it. And then, that knowledge that you get from those experiences helps you to really build new pathways in your brain about what a new ritual might be like.
Yeah. Well, and I love that. And I've heard other people use the same type of analogy, okay, well, if you don't want to drink, that's fine. But experiment with it and go out to, the party or the club or the bar, whatever it is, and be curious about how other people start acting as they've had 1 or 2 or 3, and not necessarily in a judgmental way, but just in a if they're acting like that, was I acting like that? And start putting yourself in their shoes and be not, and believe me, you'll start laughing. It's funny because you're they don't know how to talk anymore. They don't know how to and you watch them walk to the bathroom and they're swaying back and forth and you're like, but again, not in a judgmental way, but in a just a that's what I would look like. And is that, if you're trying to cut back, I think it helps put yourself in a better space to say, okay, I really can do without that. Because, the fun that I thought it was bringing me was not really fun. It was letting me forget everything.
Yeah, 100%. You just have to be willing to experiment and put yourself in situations. And I think people would be surprised.
Yeah. And the curiosity with food, I think is another big piece, because I get a lot of people that are, I would never eat that, or I would never eat this, or I would never, or they try something for the first time and they're like, oh, that was not what I was expecting. I'm not going to do that again. but I think a big piece of it is like, where are you on your journey towards being healthy? Because some things that are naturally sweet, like I think of like something like papaya or something that's like, it's a fruit, it's naturally sweet. Most people enjoy the taste and flavor, but if you've been eating ultra processed foods and your taste buds are jacked up, and like, it's going to be a completely different type of sweetness that most people go, ooh, I don't like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes a little while to experiment, and just like you said, being curious about trying different foods.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's super important as well.
Yeah. And like, so are there any foods that you would say, like, if somebody is, on the typical American diet and they're not getting vegetables, unless maybe they're just getting like lettuce and tomato and their pickles on their hamburger, but they're not, getting anything else, skipping the salads, skipping all that stuff because they're just eating the French fries and the tater tots and, steak and potatoes. Like, what are the things that like they should start adding in that would help them start helping their, like, that their body would also help them get over the hump, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I think I think it's because people this isn't necessarily my favorite vegetable to eat,
Mm-hmm.
but I think the two ways that I try to start, I just encourage people to have a salad a day. And if
Mm-hmm.
you're not a salad lover, we can talk about other ways to do that. But
Yeah.
and just try a variety of lettuces. I mean, there's so many out there.
Right.
So, and just make a small salad to start, and you choose whatever vegetables you want, but just keep experimenting. But have, try that, whether it's lunch or it's dinner, or you want to sneak it into whatever meal you've got. But I think because people can relate to that. Oh, a salad. Yeah, a salad. And there are ways to make that fast by buying, already washed lettuces and things like that. So I think for the average person, I usually start there. And then I'm a big fan of berries. I think it's it's great fiber. And I think it's a really great treat to make yourself. People can relate to like a PB&J. Mm-hmm. So I'll make that a healthy version.
Yeah.
Either take a rice cake, put a little layer of nut butter, and smash raspberries, or a whole grain English muffin. And it's just so good because it's like good fiber in those berries, and it's just gets people incorporating more fruits and vegetables. Mm-hmm. So just probably not a surprise there. That's typically where I start. And if I've got a non-veggie starter, like we got an uphill battle. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about ways to blend and vary and just kind of sneak it in that way, whether it's a handful of spinach or kale. Right. And that's sometimes a good strategy for kids.
Yeah. Well, and with kids, what I love to, like, of course, my kids, one of the things we told them is early on, all kids want snacks. All kids want, it's just it's a part of life. And especially once they hit a certain age, mine are 12 and 14. It's like, they want more because they're growing more. They're hitting their growth spurt and they just need more. But we started early on with like, nope, you're not allowed to have anything. Like you have it at a mealtime. You don't need to have snacks throughout the day, unless it's fruit. If you want a piece of fruit, and so they learned that trick very quickly of like, and they still do it. My son did it last night. In fact, he comes out of his bedroom at like 9:00 and we're like, what are you doing? He says, I'm hungry. Like, no, but I want something. Can I have this? Can I have, no. Can I have a banana? I'm like, yes. Cause I told you can always have a piece of fruit. Like, even though I know timing wise, it might not be perfect because it's right before he goes to bed, but like, that's for a growing boy. It's fruit. It's not going to, it's right. By far the best solution at that time. But the other thing is I suggest to people is like, okay, well, if they eat cereal, put fruit in it, put berries in it. Right.
Yes. Great idea. Yogurts or
like
oatmeal. Yeah.
Yeah. Like sneak it in. And my kids, they love kale. They love, because we've started it off from an early. And I think that's another thing for people that have young kids. Like, don't just assume just because every other kid doesn't like, broccoli or green beans or whatever, that your kid's not gonna like it. just start them early and cook them different ways and let them taste
Yes.
them and, season them different ways to where you find out like, okay, they like it this way. Cause there's one thing to be like I said, like the super healthy, everything's gotta be perfect. But okay, well, I think everybody knows to avoid too much salt. But if you've got to salt something for the kids to eat it and it's green beans, like salt the green beans.
Yeah, exactly. Put a little dollop of butter on it too. I mean, that's it's gonna get them to eat it.
Yeah.
And so I'm a big believer too of I mean, again, I'm dealing with you. I let people like me who like me pulling it off on a given day is a struggle, just like most parents.
Yeah.
And so there is nothing wrong about pulling out some frozen veggies. In fact, like that can sometimes be just as good a quality as the fresh stuff.
Oh yeah.
As long as you don't have the sauces and things. So just, being practical about how we can get healthy foods on the table, I think is really important.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you mentioned sauces. That's one of the things that I usually tell people, like, try to avoid as much as possible, because especially if it's like a fast food sauce or something, because you just don't know what's in there, and typically that's where you're getting a ton of calories.
Yeah,
and it's like if that's the first choice and first step that you can make, like that will put you leaps ahead of other people.
100%. I agree. Yeah. I mean, and along those lines, like cooking at home, that's usually a strategy too. Like I mean, if you have to go out, you have to go out, but that's a quick and easy way to usually see some like fast results, is to make some food at home.
Right. I know there's statistics about, that we need to drink more water, and that would curb a lot of, diseases, and as far as chronic diseases, sleep more and cook at home. Those are like the three things. It's like, what you cook doesn't really matter.
Yes. Right.
And so it's more about, because I think most people, if they started cooking at home, they'd start looking at it and going like, well, I'm not going to cook that. Well, I'm not going to cook. Like, I want to and they start preparing meals in a better way. And because nobody can afford to go and eat at the true, like, 5-star healthy places all the time, because the meal's expensive, because it's better meal prepared in a better way. And that's a sign that it's going to be healthier for you.
I agree too. I just everybody loves a good hack too in the kitchen. Like, how do I what's the quickest way to make good tasting lean proteins or your meals throughout the day?
Yep. And I think the easiest thing that a lot of people have gotten away from is just learning what spices you like from a hack standpoint, because those spices can do major things for your health, for your gut digestion and all that. And it's like, when we forget that and we take those out and just stick to salt, like, add those other spices in, and experiment with what you like. And it's okay if everything tastes the same. Yeah. Like, from day to day, that's okay.
That too. Just getting comfortable with the fact that you might eat the same sorts of things.
Yeah.
Just, and I love what you said. Is there a particular spice that you think is a game changer?
Well, I know oregano does a lot. Oregano does a lot for your brain health, for your gut health as well, which is why it does more for your brain health. And I mean, turmeric's gotten a ton of, noise in the past couple of years. And I think it's valid. I don't think it's not a come and go that we're going to hear, disappear in 5 years or something. But a lot of people in the US don't necessarily know how to cook with turmeric.
Yeah. I'm one of those. I'll have to look up some of your recipes.
So it's not something that we cook a lot with, but we'll add it to smoothies or something like that, where it's like we're getting it there. But oregano, garlic, we do onions, dried onions, stuff like that. It's just stuff that we all know and heard of. It's nothing like that. It's earth shattering. Like, you don't have to go get the things that are, found at the bottom of the sea and the Arctic Ocean, and, like, I mean, those things are out there and they're making noise, but like, you don't have to get those things.
Yeah, I did come across a good one though, that it was new for me. I mean, well, first
Yeah.
of all, everything bagel seasoning is like one of those that, I mean, who doesn't like a salt and crunch?
Yep.
So that can make anything from salmon to avocado toast taste awesome. So but I found one from Trader Joe's. It's like a mushroom seasoning.
Oh,
it's got a combination of mushrooms and a little bit of spice to it.
Yeah.
It just is a little bit different way to liven up a chicken or this, that, or the other.
Right. Well, and I mean, that just, it just adds the other thing about it when you say the mushroom flavor, like if you can get something that's also adding in different types of foods, so you've got, okay, a little bit of mushroom that's on top, like it might not seem like a lot because maybe it's in whole, you're getting half a tablespoon or half a teaspoon of something, but that little bit can go a long way just to expanding. One of the things that I've heard is we want to, from a healthy gut standpoint, we want to have a variety of vegetables, like up to like 30 to 40 in a week of different types of vegetables, right? And so somebody might go, oh my gosh, how am I going to get that many vegetables? That's crazy. But if you think about it, like, okay, well, if I dab a little parsley on something, okay, well, that could technically be your vegetable, right? Like that could be one. It's an exposure to a different plant. So things like that, I think sometimes make it easier for people to figure out, like, okay, this is expanding my range of content that I'm consuming. So
yeah, that's a tough one though. I find it hard to get people to eat the vegetables, but but I think it's so important to get variety just to keep life interesting so you get bored of it.
Right. So I realize we're running out of time here, and I want to be respectful of your time. But give us, how can people get in touch with you? What's the best way to like learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, thanks so much for asking. So foodandmoodlab.com is my website, and there's all the links to social, but there's a community out there on Facebook, Food and Mood Lab, and then on Instagram, Keep It Real with Amy. But those are all easily found if you go to foodandmoodlab.com.
Awesome. And you've got your blog on there. You mentioned that.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So is there anything that you would want to tell somebody who is like in that stuck spot? They don't know what to do. They don't know what their first step should be. Like what's that like last thing that maybe we haven't talked about that is like, okay, well, here's what you need to know.
I think when someone's feeling stuck, I believe that it's like a two-part question. One, I think it's just about a lot of grace and compassion. I mean, it's challenging to make these changes. And I think just realizing that if you allow yourself and just understand that having these like data points or just situations, like use it as an opportunity to learn about why. And like think about like the curiosity, it does something. It just releases you from that guilt and you be more hopeful. So I think starting with that just grace and compassion is like kind of unlocks a person and just gives them the ability to be forward thinking and hopeful. And then when someone's like wants and really is willing to put a little effort into change, my strategy is for at least a week is to make one promise to yourself every day that's completely achievable. It might sound like it's defeating the purpose because people think goals, they got to think big. I mean, like the tiniest promise, have 20 ounces of water in a day or work out for 5 minutes. You're going to do it. And the whole idea is to get a streak going and just to build some momentum and just keeping it one promise, one little micro goal that you can accomplish, not one that you're reaching for the stars, and just get a good week under your belt. So that's really where I help people go, just again, the feeling of checking that box and just having a win, doing what you say you're going to do, is just super powerful to get that streak started.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that sometimes when we want to make change, we think way too big, and so having those little bitty things to go like, oh, okay, I did make a change because I did this one little thing that I said I wanted to do, and I can accomplish something. Yeah, that's huge. So, well, thank you so much, Amy, for being a guest. I really enjoyed it.
Sorry for the ding. It's school just got out. So everybody wants to know what food we have.
Right. Of course, that's the question of the day.
Exactly. Well, thanks again. It was a pleasure to have the conversation, and appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and your listeners.
Thanks for checking out the Confidence Through Health podcast. Please subscribe, post a review, share this episode with those you love who need a little extra help with their health journey. Visit allinhealthandwellness.com to learn more about the coaching programs that I provide. All episodes are produced by the Social Media Cowboys, your source for all online marketing needs. Go to socialmediacowboys.com for more information.